All right, friends. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Nicholas Hudson, and I serve as the Director of the Office of Student Orientation, Leadership, and Engagement. And I'd like to welcome you to the fifth installment of this year's International Leadership Series event. This year's theme for the International Leadership Series, which is a joint event between us and the Office of International Engagement, is entitled Peace and Conflict. That's our theme for the year. And it is one of the elements of global citizenship as defined by Oxfam, right? And they are 7 elements of which we cover: so sustainable development, social justice and equity, human rights, peace and conflict, identity, power and governance, and globalization and interdependence. And all 7 of these elements are what constitutes a global citizen, and thus being an international university. Our hope is when you graduate from this institution, you'll have the skill sets necessary to operate in a global environment. For those of you who are interested, and there's still time to sign up to be an International Leadership Fellow. I've seen a lot of you throughout the year. Some of you are new to join us. There is still time for you to join and be an International Leadership Fellow. You have to attend 5 of the 6. You can either do it in person or online. And you also have to participate in the Art for Social Change event happening here in April. The Art for Social Change event is already available on to sign up on Presence. You'll turn in an piece of artwork and you'll be able to participate. A couple of definitions that we want everybody to hopefully know by the time they finish this series is how we define peace, conflict, etc. There's 2 forms of peace. One is positive peace, defined as the attitudes, institutions, and structures that creates and sustains peaceful societies. And then there's also negative peace, which is understood as the absence of violence or fear of violence. We define conflict as conceptually defined, a form of intense interpersonal dissonance, right? Either tension, antagonism, between 2 or more interdependent parties when they have different goals, needs, desires, values, beliefs, attitudes. Social justice is defined as the inclusion of everyone in the full benefits of society and to participate fully in the economic, cultural, social, and political aspects of a country. And inherent in conflict and in peace, and even in today's topic around conflict resolution, there's this idea of power, which we define as the ability or the official authority to decide what is best for others, who has access to resources, and who has the capacity to exercise that control over others. Inherently, no matter which environment that we show ourselves in, we have privilege, and the way that we show up in those spaces, privilege is defined as unearned access to resources. All of you being in college right now are privileged, and those that are not in college, right? So, and then there are differing forms of oppression. And so today, again, this theme for the year has been on peace and conflict, and we know that there's a lot of conflict happening on an international scale. We continue to see hot spots break out across the board, but again, oppression is systems that maintain advantage and disadvantage based off of individual, institutional, or cultural levels. So today we have conflict resolution, international communication barriers. If you wouldn't mind giving a warm dust of a welcome to our friends from the Office of Student Conduct and Community Engagement, our Associate Director, Cynthia Mendiola, and our Program Manager, Priscilla Cadena. One of you these, and the other one can have this one.
Good afternoon, everybody. Really exciting to see a room so full of so many of you, and welcome again to the 5th series or the 5th part of the International Leadership Series. And so together with Ms. Priscilla today, we'll be discussing a little bit on communication barriers. And so just going into what we'll be reviewing We've got 4 different points that we want to make sure to try to target with you today. And that's going to be that by the end of this, we hope that you'll be able, of course, to identify conflicts or cultural differences that communication barriers in an international setting, as well as being able to identify what those barriers are, and identifying effective communication. In addition, being able to examine the different roles of culture and communication barriers, as well as learning to engage and apply successful strategies so that you guys can overcome this and all in all have positive and successful interactions.
Awesome. So let's talk about conflict. What is conflict? I want you all to picture a world where conflict doesn't exist. When you think about the word conflict, probably what comes to mind is an image of maybe 2 people arguing over a disagreement. Maybe you think about violent conflict. As Dr. Hudson talked a little bit earlier about wars, protests. But again, what would a world look like without conflict? Simply put, conflict is a disagreement or clash between individuals or groups due to opposing interests, values, or viewpoints. So that means throwing conflict out, everyone would basically have to agree on everything that everyone thinks about. That means everyone would share the same favorite color, same favorite food, same favorite movies, same favorite genre, same favorite sports team, which that in itself is conflict because it's competition. It would be pretty dull. There would be of course there wouldn't be any riots, it would be peaceful, but like I said, being dull, there would be no diversity and no uniqueness. Simply put, also that conflict is a part of our human nature. And because we're dealing with people and humans on a daily basis, conflict is going to be inevitable. You deal with humans if you live in your household with your family. You deal with humans if you're employed here on campus, off campus, in your work environment. You deal with humans when you have to go purchase your groceries. You deal with humans when you walk in the park, when you go to the gym. There's always going to be interactions with humans, and not everybody thinks the same. People think that one way should be done, or you should have responded differently this way. I would have done things different. When you work in those group projects, right? For your academic classes, the way that you all want to tackle things might be different. There might be disagreements on that. So a lot of times when we see conflict is going to be negative. And that's how we're mostly trained to see it. But how we respond to conflict is what matters. And that's all you have control over. Did you know that the #1 way that people avoid, well, I gave it away right here. Did you know that the #1 way people respond to conflict is by avoiding it? There's discussions, there's topics that maybe we don't want to talk about with our family or loved ones, with our partners, with our employers, and we kind of just sweep it under the rug and we kind of do this, right? And we just don't want to talk about it because we might get anxious. We might not know how we might feel. We might get defensive, right? If somebody calls us out on something that we did wrong. But if we were to see conflict differently and change our lens to look at conflict more as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, and an opportunity for positive change, I would encourage you then to be able to embrace conflict with openness, with curiosity, and again, for a chance to grow.
Taking away from what Dr. Hudson said at the beginning of his introduction and going with what Priscilla said, conflict is definitely inevitable. Now, when we're looking at conflict, like Chris said, conflict, we tend to approach it as something that is negative, but I want you guys to consider that conflict can either be competitive or it can be cooperative. So conflict exists for the very sake of trying to decide on being able to meet someone else, finding a middle ground, finding the opportunity to get to a particular goal together. And that's putting all kinds of barriers aside, dealing with all kinds of barriers that begin to present themselves. Now, when we're talking about intercultural conflicts, or when we're dealing, like in international relations, we're dealing with people from different cultures or different societies, we understand that there are going to be differences in the manner in which, number one, just the manner in the way we might present the information. Perhaps our goal differs from the way that they have established their goal, but when we look at very specific areas, we have these, for instance, cultural norms and practices. So we're talking about, things such as our workplace, the way that we gather, things that we normally do, like the way we dress, our typical etiquette, things like that can vary between cultures or different social groups. Then we go into values and beliefs. We think about things like religion, the dynamics of the family, the roles of the family, how all of this is comprised in different cultures. There are going to be variations, sometimes even just gender roles change. And that needs to, of course, be considered. Then we look at stereotyping and prejudice, right? There's so many things that, for whatever reason, we've been taught or we've learned somewhere that specific ethnicities or specific cultures, we have this kind of blanket idea of certain expectations of certain groups already. And so that can definitely get us in trouble because we're already going in with a preconceived idea, and that's probably already obstructing our ability to be able to get to that middle ground and find a successful way to get things done. And so that brings us to ethnocentrism, right? So if we're being ethnocentric, then we are, even though we might be exploring the possibility of differences from another culture or the differences with someone else, our own biases are keeping us from actually, I guess, accepting, respecting, or making room for those differences with the other people that we are working to engage in.
So moving forward, and when you're going to experience interacting with another person from a different culture, more than likely one of those main barriers is going to be the communication barrier. So communication barriers are any factors that prevent us from effectively exchanging and understanding messages. They can be physical, cultural, linguistic, or emotional, and can occur within or between individuals, groups, and organizations.
So we're looking at different types of communication barriers. We have emotional, physical, and cultural. So emotional, I think that's a big one, especially like in the recent years. And I hate to throw out like this whole impact of like COVID and whatnot, but things changed. We know that things changed over the last few years. We know that the dynamics of social interaction have changed. We know that social culture has changed. And very simply, a term that says we don't know what someone else might be carrying, right? We don't know what someone else might be enduring. And so you might approach someone with a specific topic or with a specific task or with a specific idea. Or maybe you came on, you're just a little extra, you came on with too much energy or, regardless. So emotions can definitely play a barrier in our interactions with one another. Not everyone may always be ready or willing to deal with different emotions that we are either projecting, or their responses to us may also be as a result of the emotions that they might be carrying. So we have that risk of the emotional barriers. Then we talk about physical barriers. These can be things like maybe the setting that we are meeting in is not appropriate. It could be perhaps there's too many people, maybe the lighting is off. Maybe it just doesn't allow for proper communication between individuals. So considering factors about your physical, your environment, the setting itself of where you are interacting with someone else. And then of course we talk about the cultural barriers. So here, we're talking about what are those values, beliefs. We talked about the stereotypes. We talked about what are their social norms, their cultural norms. How do they differ from ours? Certain behaviors that we might exhibit, perhaps, for example, of course, most of us here are Hispanic, right? We have certain social tradition, we have certain cultural tradition, when on the contrary to someone else who is not of the Hispanic culture, we might come off as weird, or we might be too much for somebody else. And so those are things that we need to consider.
So continue. Hello, testing. Okay. Go. Testing. Alrighty, so continuing with that idea, one of the biggest barriers in the communication would be the language barrier. So language barriers in communication is difficulty or obstacle that arises when people who speak different languages attempt to interact. This can prevent people from understanding each other and lead to misunderstandings, frustration, and even conflict. The language barrier can be caused by a lack of knowledge of other person's language or lack of proficiency in both languages. So again, if you're interacting with somebody from a different culture that maybe speaks a language that's not even similar to maybe your second language here, since majority of us are Hispanic, so Spanish, that could be very difficult if you can't connect any certain words, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about my undergraduate experience. So a little bit about me and my TAMU experience. I graduated class of 2018 with my major in communication and minor in international leadership. So the coolest thing from undergrad experience was my last class that I needed in order to graduate was only offered abroad. So heck, of course I'm going to travel abroad. So the opportunity to take the leadership course was offered in Italy. Backtrack a little bit, my experience in going abroad didn't start there. Back in high school, I had the opportunity to travel with a program to go to the UK. My mom was like, Priscilla, for your birthday, for your 15th birthday, do you want a quinceañera or do you want to go abroad for 21 days? I'm like, heck, that's an easy answer. Forget the quinceañera, send me abroad for 21 days. You're gonna pay the same thing for one night than what you're paying for the program for me to go experience. And I want to see the world. So I went to the UK, had the opportunity to go to England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Over there, the primary language is English, so I had no problem communicating, navigating my way over there. So backtrack to my undergraduate experience in taking this leadership course in Italy. Well, there is a language barrier there. We mostly stayed around in Rome, and our hotel was nearby the touristic areas. So of course, Rome and Italy itself is very touristic. So they're gonna have people that probably are fluent in Italian and other languages as they're giving tours, etc. And no English. But when you start traveling outside of the skirts of where these touristic places are, you're going to start encountering people and interacting with people that maybe are not fluent in English, right? Because they're working in other areas. So that was something difficult for me to experience because I hadn't experienced it before in my time abroad. I walked around an area with my group of classmates and we stumbled upon this really awesome chocolate factory store where they made chocolate. And they had a cafe where you can order something from the store. So what I had ordered was like a chocolate cup. So apparently this lady that was working there, Italian, fluent in only Italian, could understand a little bit of English and took my order. And she saw that because we were a group ordering together, I ended up finding out she started adding all the orders together at the end for one tab. So first off, I had asked her for a small order. She confused it, and when my order came out, she gave me a large. So I told her, I'm so sorry, this is incorrect. I had ordered a small because obviously a large is going to cost a little bit more. And, I took it as she understood, but she kind of had based on her expressions, a little bit of annoyance with that. And at the very end, when we were ready to pay, they wouldn't allow us to pay individually for us. And it was kind of hard to communicate and to understand her. And both all of us students and her, she was the one person on the team doing this, were very frustrated. So I looked at the receipt and she still charged me for the large order that she gave me when I told her that it was incorrect and it was her fault. But this wasn't getting communicated nor being understood. So at the end of the day, one of our classmates just kind of called in and was like, you know what, forget it. I'll just pay for it and you all pay me back. And that's how it ended up being, right? I didn't have any other basic Italian words that I could share, and it was just so difficult. And I was already heated because I did my part in correcting her. I tried my best to clarify a small order. And other than that, she had it wrong, and then she was charging all of us, which is a little bit difficult because who's going to decide to pay, right, for this? We're college students, right? And the tab could be a little bit expensive because we're a large group. So we experienced conflict, and this was definitely hard with the language barrier. Moving forward to another type of language barrier Maybe, for example, you're interacting with another person from a different culture, and the language barrier is maybe not that intense, right? I think it's so important to be mindful in the way that we still communicate with one another when it comes to speaking in English. So if the other person is maybe not so fluent, maybe intermediate, right, and can have a basic conversation with, it's so important that for us that are fluent in English trying to get a message across, that we are aware of the idiomatic expressions or colloquialisms, that's a hard word for me to memorize how to pronounce correctly, may not translate well, and it might lead to understandings. So imagine in a conversation where people are trying to know the language and exactly what each word means. When we use expressions like this, the famous break a leg, piece of cake, it's raining cats and dogs, and bite the bullet. Imagine like you're learning the language and you know like the actual meanings of each word and you use it like this, you can throw somebody off. So let's say, for example, this might not be the best example, but you're interacting with an international student who's here on campus, and you all have the same class and you all are going over the exam. It's after class and you all are discussing, how did the exam go? Maybe the international students ask you, how do you think the exam went? And your response is, oh, it was a piece of cake. Like, what? See where that can throw somebody off, like, okay, I'm asking about an exam, the test, and they mentioned something about cake. There was cake, did I not see that? Right? So it's important to be mindful of the things that we use for that. Colloquialisms is like those informal words, like y'all, and I think that's like more of a Texas thing, right? How y'all doing? Or that's cool beans. Or she's pretty hangry, I'm pretty hangry right now. What does that mean? Or, you know, her and I were just chilling. What does that mean, right? There's other words that we could use to describe how we feel or describe something, and we use these informal words that we have. So it's very important that we keep this in mind. Most recently, my husband and I like to host game nights at our house. So we invite our friends that we met throughout college and maintain a good relationship with to our house to play a couple of game nights. So one of my best friends, she met this girl at the gym. She's Egyptian and she's also Muslim. And she said, hey, I met this girl at the gym. We've been friends for a good amount of time now, hanging out at the gym. I would like to invite her to meet the rest of our group and come for game night. Would that be okay? Yeah, sure. You know, I was pretty curious because I had never really met somebody who was Egyptian or interacted with somebody who was Egyptian. So I had a lot of questions myself, right? She comes to game night. We start a game. That game ends up being 5 minutes, and the rest was just us wanting to get to know a little bit more about her and her culture. We start going back to talking about like just our daily lives, and one of my friends continues to go on, and we use a lot of Tex-Mex, so we go from English to Spanish here and there describing our day. So she talks about, you know, back at work, you know, we were there chismeando and this and that, and she's like, wait, I'm sorry, pause. Chismeando? What does that mean? And we're like, oh, okay. And so she's like, you know, chismeando is like chisme. So, you know, we say, what's the cheese? And she's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, the cheese? Yeah, I'm like, we were gossiping, what's the gossip? What's the scoop, right? So what's the cheese? We're chismeando. She's like, oh, okay. And I could see that she was trying to like connect it like cheese and cheese, you know, but she's like, okay, now I get it. Now I'm on your level, right? So it's being mindful that we got to be mindful of these things to use when we're in the room around people from different cultures, because they might not be able to pick that up or aware of that.
Chris gives us great examples about language barriers and things that we're actively doing, but then we have to consider nonverbal communication. And so like in conversation with Chris just a few days ago, she was saying a smile is universal. And I mean, I'm a mom of boys. And so I have this thing with the boys that I always tell them, like, you know, when you get to school, please make sure as you're walking the halls, just smile to people, especially to the adults. You know, the adults have a lot on their plates, and it goes a long way when students smile to a staff member, a faculty member, whatever. It just changes the mood. It's a good thing. You know, someone smiles at you and that was cool. Okay, it's just a good interaction, right? But then as we talk a little bit more and more, in other cultures, smiling at someone is like, why are you laughing at me? What are you smiling at? What is funny to you? And so something as simple and as really an intentional, just an intent to be kind to someone in our culture might come off as disrespectful in another. And so we talk about like, okay, what are different things that we in our culture, or we like in our everyday normal, what is it that we do that could be taken differently, right, by somebody else? And so we talk about hand gestures. I didn't realize that just giving someone like a thumbs up in another culture might actually mean something vulgar to them. When to us is we're exchanging positive, we're exchanging affirmation, right? We talk about the facial expressions, we talk about a smile, but maybe even sometimes in conversation. Again, as a mom, you know, we're sitting at dinner, usually go to dinner with my family on Sunday evenings, and I always tell the kids, like, okay, when the waiter comes and says, is everything okay, or do you need anything, or something when you're placing your order, please make sure that you're making eye contact. Offer the individual respect and make eye contact. And so that's my teaching for my sons, for my boys, right? I'm just trying to raise good humans. But in another culture, it comes off as aggressive. Like, you want something with me? Like, or, you know, we have beef or things like that. And so something very simple changes dramatically from culture to culture. Body language, I mean, this is going to vary tremendously. And then touching. How many of us were raised that when you enter a room, we were laughing about this. We enter a room, and my boys can tell you they've hated me for this. You know, we're a family of about 40 some on my husband's side. So it's like, when you get there, please make sure to say hi to all your tias, tios, and primos. And, you know, my kid walks in and be like, hey, ya saludar, que grosero. Like, you know, I'm like, don't be rude. You have to go say hi to everybody. And then it's time to go, and it's like, okay, go say bye to everybody. Go around the entire house. Don't forget the backyard. And then Uncle Juan's outside in the front with Tio Jorge. Please go make your way out there. You can't leave until you said, you know, farewell to everyone. And it's hug, kiss on the cheek, or the, you know, the high five, you know, fist bump, whatever, but that's appropriate. Versus in another culture, you're invading someone's personal space. And a proper hello might be just entering the room and greeting everyone respectfully from a distance and then taking your place. So those are significant differences that we see. Ms. Pris has something. Is that next? Oh, yes.
Okay. So we want to go ahead and show you all a video, a little funny video about awareness, the importance of having awareness of intercultural communication and understanding. So hopefully y'all can.
Okay, what else?
Okay. Hopefully y'all can hear well. Oh, let me.
Yes.
Yes, man, me.
I do not understand item H403.
H403. Yeah, a lot of Americans wear these to sporting events.
But why, sir?
It's hard to explain. We just do. Yes.
I don't understand the purpose of A221.
A221. That's a burger brand. Americans eat a lot of beef, and some people like to burn their initials into their food with a red-hot iron before they eat it.
Why?
It's like a cattle brand. You know, the thing you use to burn a symbol into a cow with? No, in America, that's how you keep track of your cow, is branding.
With a red-hot iron?
Yeah.
But wouldn't the cow run away?
Oh, no, we only do it to baby cows. When they're, you know, small enough to hold them down. Yes, Asha?
A suggestion, Mr. Todd.
Go ahead.
You need to learn about India.
Moving on. So why should we care about all this stuff? Why is this important, everything that we said? Well, the idea of going back to globalization. In today's interconnected world, globalization has made cross-cultural communication essential in various fields. University students are likely to interact with people from diverse cultural backgrounds in their academic and professional lives. Awareness of international communication barriers can help students navigate these interactions effectively. As you all are venturing out into the world, whether that is transferring to another university, maybe doing a study abroad program, later on, once post-graduation, now having to work globally. I just recently had one of our friends, talking back with one of my friends, her name is Connie, some of y'all might know her. And from my understanding with Connie's experience was that she hadn't really traveled much around the United States, but traveled out and only going to Mexico and different parts of Mexico. So when she got the chance to go to like California, she was super excited and was very like, wow, California, now I want to move here, right? And my good friend Connie had this big passion to want to learn. She was so interested and fond of other people's cultures. And now she has an opportunity where now she's employed across the seas and 9 hours ahead of us in Qatar over there. It's very, very different. And I'm sure right now she's over the moon, right? So you might have potential opportunities like that in the future where you might have this curiosity also and want to immerse yourself in the culture to actually learn more about it and challenging yourself to maybe look for opportunities outside globally. That all this stuff is going to be important. Or you just never know who you're going to run into, right, at the gym, like my best friend, right? The type of people you're going to encounter, the type of people that are going to move to Laredo also for employment opportunities here. The next one that I have for you, if you can help me out with that, yeah. Study abroad programs. Some of you all I know in this room have already gotten the opportunity to study abroad, right? And I'm sure that you also have your input and your say about your experience with exactly this presentation. I highly encourage you that you need to consider looking into study abroad because that is where you're going to get that experience. You can read about the culture, you can talk to somebody about it, but until you're actually there stepping in, watching it, looking at the places, learning about the history, looking at special artifacts that they still have nowadays, looking at the castles that are still standing, tasting the food that the locals eat, that is when you immerse yourself into the experience and learning about the culture when you apply yourself in that area. So I highly encourage you to consider doing study abroad programs. There's programs that you can do for a whole semester abroad. That's a little bit challenging and intimidating for me when I think about taking that on back in undergrad. But there's also these winter semester courses that I told you all that it's like 2 weeks and a half and on. So really consider studying abroad if a class is offered, or maybe you still have some elective options that you need to choose as well. This is where I always tell students like, okay, well, if your class that you need for your major is maybe not offered abroad, consider maybe using your electives that if there's maybe a leadership course also offered abroad, maybe use that as an elective to go over there. Or also, if it's not even part of your major and you have the finances and you can fundraise for it, just go and do it. Apply over there and see the world for yourself because there's so much more that you all need to see and get out there for.
So as students, like Chris was saying, right now you guys have incredible opportunities that you all are experiencing as students, and then programs such as study abroad that give you that opportunity for that international exposure. When you start thinking about the next step and where you go from here, and you start thinking about then the workforce and the workforce diversity. I mean, just coming into your professional career, you come into a department, into an agency, into a business, into an organization that is bringing together a pool of different people from different backgrounds with different skills, different talents, different education, different development, different upbringing. And that in of itself is going to throw you into a big pool or mixing pot of so much diversity. Every department will display individuals with different years of experience, with different areas of study, different experiences, different languages that perhaps they speak. And in addition, depending on, like I'm thinking of one of the students like in our office currently, you know, and several of our students are business majors. And immediately I'm thinking, I guess especially being raised here in Laredo, we know that there's a lot of interaction with our neighboring country just here in Mexico. And then we think about other countries and other individuals that you make connection with, that you build and form relationships with for the sake of the success of your business, or even in different organizations when you're trying to accomplish different goals. The idea, we hear this concept of networking, right? And so we are networking with different professionals, but on many occasions, you're networking with individuals from different cultures, with different backgrounds and different expectations. At the beginning of the presentation, we said, perhaps you're coming into a conversation, or you're coming into a meeting, or you're coming into something with a particular goal and with particular direction. However, that individual might be coming with something different. And so learning about the background of the other organization, the other individual, is going to allow you for that room to then find a middle ground. Maybe you might not get all of this that you were hoping for, but in learning about the other culture and learning about these differences, perhaps you can at least be able to find something agreeable where you can begin and then build from. And then, of course, we talk about global citizenship. So as future leaders and citizens, like, we understand we have the responsibility to promote cultural understanding and cooperation across borders. And so this is going to continue, not only now as students, but as you continue to evolve as professionals. Experiences such as those that Ms. Priscilla shared with us, whether it's personal experiences or professional experience, require for us to grow, require for us to explore a little bit. And I think in the coming slides, when we talk about, like, for instance, her encounter with her new friend Nera, that's pretty cool. I mean, she's Muslim, Egyptian, nothing like I've ever met before, but I thought it was really great. It started very simple as a game night, and then very comfortably, they made the effort to learn about the other culture by being curious and just asking questions. And so Nera was so good to just offer back feedback about her background, her social traditions, her cultural traditions, and in turn, Nera felt comfortable enough to say, hey, what's chismeando? So now she's learning a little bit about the culture that Priscilla and her friends are experiencing. And so it just opens that door, and that's a wonderful example about finding that middle ground and being able to peacefully move forward as, in this case, a group of friends. Another thing, recognizing your own biases. So earlier we were talking about stereotypes, and we talked about being ethnocentric. A lot of times we get lost in this idea, like, our way is the best way to do it. Our way is the correct way to do it. If they don't practice certain social tendencies, then it's incorrect, right? I think we shared a little bit on a different race. Like, for instance, I gave you the example that, in our Hispanic culture, we have this expectation, like, well, my expectation that my boys acknowledge their family and their loved ones, and you walk into the room and you say hello to everybody, versus maybe someone of a different culture comes in and from a distance says hello, and you think, like, why such a dry attitude? And it's not that they have a dry attitude, that is their proper form of greeting. And so just that idea, like, why so dry, that's improper. And that's my own bias, thinking that the way that we do it is better and correct. And so definitely recognizing what our biases are and being open to overcoming that. And then, is it possible that our communication style has to change? I was reading about the Indian culture, and it happened to be an article regarding a business interaction between the United States and India. And so in the United States, we are very accustomed to, we're going to start on time, and I'm going to honor your time, and I'm going to get through this presentation quickly because I know that your time is valuable. And so here we are, like, shooting all this information. And that's what they did on the United States side. Those business individuals presented their case, their proposal, very quickly to their partners from India. Their partners from India were very offended that the United States came in and just basically puked out a whole bunch of words without forming any real business relationship with them. The partners from India felt disrespected. They felt that they were not being valued, and that they had no interest in doing any kind of business negotiations with those partners from the United States. And it wasn't anything other than the concept of time. And so something so simple, right? When we think about it all the time, like, okay, it's 3 o'clock, guys, we're gonna start on time, I wanna honor your time, I wanna make sure I get you guys out of here at 4:20, right? And so Andy's like, no, we're gonna stay here until we've got a really good conversation, and when I feel good about it, you can go home. Right? And it's like, well, you know, was it bachelor is at 7? Forgive me. But you get the group, you get the idea. And then managing your emotions. We talked about emotional barriers at the beginning. You don't understand where someone else might be coming from. You also don't know where the person that you're approaching is at. I think the emotional barrier most often tends to be a primary factor in miscommunication or misunderstanding. And so, of course, going back, understanding, recognizing your own biases, recognizing where you stand, and then offering consideration for the other party as well. I'm gonna pass it to Chris. She had some great ideas on third-party helpers.
Okay. So with third-party helpers, I mean, again, in the moment of conflict where literally language is a barrier, where then and there in the moment, you're not fluent, the other person doesn't know, then and there in the moment, you're not going to be able to, okay, now I understand Italian, right? So taking it back to my undergrad experience, another conflict that I had encountered, again, just not knowing, was our group had packed a TAMU flag. Just a simple white flag that had the TAMU logo on it. That way, anywhere that we traveled to, our group was able to take out our flag and just take a nice group picture. Nothing bad, no harm in it, right, that we try to do. Well, we entered the Coliseum and we were with a tour guide and we're like, okay, this would be a perfect spot to take a picture with our flag. So we took the flag out, got a couple of shots. I got a couple of shots of other people with my camera. And just when they were taking photos of me, one of the security guards in the Coliseum came in. He's full Italian, was not able to really speak English that well. Just aggressively, all he could say in English was delete, delete, delete. And I'm like, you know, freaking out, anxious in the moment because he was very aggressive and I thought I was doing no harm. I'm just taking a picture with the camera, right? So our tour guide wasn't aware at this point, and I'm like, okay, this guy has a problem with me with the flag and me using my camera, a little bit confused. And, you know, he kind of also touched my equipment too, that I had the camera, and was making sure that I had to delete it, right? So the tour guide kind of hears now and he jumps in. And again, with Italian, it kind of sounds a little bit like Spanish, so I could pick up a couple of words that sounded similar. So, you know, I'm hearing that him saying like universidad, like it's just university. But there's been some times where they do a lot of propaganda stuff. So people are taking out some flags and it's for something else, you know, trying to do different type of messaging that's not peaceful, right? Sharing their interests and what's right and what's wrong, and doing it at a historical site. So they have to be mindful that, you know, these banners are not useful, regardless of what it is, just to be fair to everyone, this is not allowed. And so, you know, you could hear something similar to where he's telling him, you know, I'm not gonna let you back here. If you do this, she needs to delete the photos, you need to put this away, right? And so now, in using third-party helpers, this is where, you know, at the time I had my tour guide to come in to help me be able to manage that conflict. I didn't get to keep the pictures because I had to delete them right in front of him, what I felt. But that was very difficult for me because I felt very anxious. I felt this guy's anger. I feel like he could have done it differently. But again, there's this language barrier that was there. But sometimes when you find yourself in situations, be mindful to like, do I have a third-party person around me who is maybe a little bit better at the language that could just bring in to help me, right, to resolve a conflict, but to still be open to try to reach an agreement. And if you have them, plus who better to come in to help you communicate that, right? So the next one is with apps. So nowadays, technology can be great, and there's so many apps now that can help you prepare for that. So this is where you start practicing. So how many of y'all maybe have Duolingo and are trying to challenge yourself? Okay, I see some hands, trying to learn another language. I think that's awesome. I think that's being a super proactive global leader, right? And you're building on your curiosity, and it's so cool to learn another language, even if it's just a little bit. So my second time abroad, so happened to be my honeymoon. I wanted to go back abroad, especially back to Italy, because I wanted my husband to experience what I experienced. So because I knew a little bit of the conflicts that I experienced last time, I tried to better myself to be more prepared or to at least have some helpful strategies with me that I could use. So I would practice with the apps. I learned my numbers, my colors in Italian. I would test myself. Or just a helpful thing that did really help me out was like when we went to a nearby mall. It wasn't near a touristic place, so it was definitely a mall that just regular locals would go, and it's more Italian. People would come up to me to ask me questions, and I'm like, oh no, no parlo italiano, and I would ask parli inglese o spagnolo, right? All right, that's what I remembered. And that did help me. They're like, oh, sí, parli español. It's like, oh, okay, perfect. And then we would talk in Spanish with them. And then, so that helped me out versus like them not knowing English, but they were actually Spaniard and had moved to Italy and been living in Italy for a while. They were able to help us. We were able to help them now communicating through our second language with Spanish. So definitely the apps are helpful just to at least learn the basics, especially if you're going into study abroad. It's so important to at least practice the basics. So to get ahead of that is also maybe considering to take as an elective or those language courses that they have offered here. We have Italian, we have Spanish. Remind me of some of them that are offered that maybe I'm not aware of. Say that again? German offered, so if you want to go to Germany, things like that where you can challenge yourself. It's going to be difficult, but as you're growing as leaders and now preparing yourself to immerse yourself and connect with different cultures, this is where you need to do your part too, and not expect the world just to adapt to you. And well, because I speak English, well, that you should be able to accommodate to me. It's like, no, if you're traveling abroad, you're entering into their territory. So it's super important to just be able to at least meet them like at a certain point. And by doing your part and preparing yourself, whether it's establishing connections with maybe somebody that you know is from that background, is like, hey, I'm very interested in this culture. I want to visit this place. Can you start teaching me? Going back to the story with Netta, my new Egyptian friend, it was really cool because she was starting to teach us, or my best friend was really curious and wants to learn Arabic. Right, she wants to go and she wants to visit over there and she wants to be able to speak fluently. So the fact that she was able to meet her, somebody who speaks Arabic, she's over the moon right now to hang out with her more, to learn more about her culture, her language. And when we were hanging out, she was able to teach us how to write our names in Arabic, something new, right? Learning about the alphabet and how it's very different from the English alphabet. So establishing your connections using these different strategies can be very helpful. And this is where, again, as your responsibility, now practicing as a global citizen, as a global leader, to know these things as you're going into a new territory or encountering somebody from a different cultural background. And so wrapping up this presentation, we talked at the very beginning, conflict. Conflict, there's gonna be, because we work with humans on a daily basis, we're all different. We're not one mindset. We're diverse. That's what makes this world unique and what makes everybody unique and beautiful. Conflict is going to be inevitable because we work with humans on a daily basis, because everyone's so different, things different. But again, what I want you all to take away from this presentation is that to see conflict as an opportunity. So, okay, I found myself in a conflict situation. I'm not going to see this as negative or something I want to avoid, but as an opportunity to challenge myself, to embrace it, and to see how I can practice responding to this. What can I learn from this? And making it into a positive change. And so with the conflict, when you're encountering that in a intercultural setting, we've identified that there are and will always be intercultural conflicts. We learned about the language and the nonverbal communication barriers that we need to be aware of and do our part to be mindful of, or just to know that that's gonna come up. We learned about why it's important to care about intercultural conflict resolution. We have to reach a solution, right? Nobody wants to leave a conflict unresolved, or again, we want to grow from it. And lastly, we discussed on how we can tackle intercultural conflict using helpful strategies and tools that we can use and be mindful with, right? So we've given you stuff to add to your toolbox to use whenever you've encountered things like that, or just to better prepare yourself when those interactions and those conflicts come up, because they are going to come up, again, inevitable. Again, thank you all so much. Each and every one of you in this room is aspiring leaders, and that's why y'all are here today. So we hope we were able to provide some perspective, some guidance, and some tools on this area specifically in working and interacting with different cultures. So you all have a great rest of your day, and thank you for your time.
All right. Are there any questions for our folks today? Any questions as related to intercultural communication barriers, things of that nature? Yeah, right there.
In reference to the study abroad,
Mhm.
is there an age limit and is there a degree limit or restriction? Like
Yeah.
certain degrees or level of degrees?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it depends, right? So there are graduate programs that allow for study abroad. There are undergraduate programs that allow for study abroad. So it really depends on the study abroad opportunity in and of itself. When I was doing my doctorate, we went and studied abroad or had the opportunity to go study abroad in South Africa, right? So we went there for the cohort went for 3 weeks to go study the higher education system in South Africa, or it's 2 weeks. So there's opportunities if they're faculty led or if they're semester based, things of that nature. There's funding available at all levels. The Gilman Scholarship is available for undergrad in particular, but there's also opportunities for you to go specifically study, for example, at Oxford, right? So there's Rhodes Scholars, things of that nature that you can apply to, and those are specifically for graduate students, right? So there's a variety of ways to do that, and studying abroad is a fantastic way to kind of navigate those intercultural barriers. Here at TAMU, I've led study abroads. I actually lead the leadership study abroad now. We go to Argentina, which is a different culture than Italy, but actually it's kind of very similar, right? So a lot of Italian immigrants live in Argentina, and it brings a lot of Italian culture and cultural practices into there. I've taken graduate students on my program. So even here at TAMU for faculty-led study abroad, there are opportunities for graduate students, depending on your program, to go on those study abroads that maybe are tailored towards undergraduate students. Yes.
Is that more of a question, but kind of can help out on that?
Mhm.
There's from sophomores to graduates, for you able to be a graduate student to study abroad, you need to be enrolled as a graduate student at TAMU taking a master's degree. And there's no age gap or age limit. I have no people going there like 27 years old, others who are 20, so it doesn't matter.
All right, any other questions? I think this is a very relevant topic as we talk about intercultural communication and conflict, right? When we think about, I've talked to multiple people, like even just tasting of new food. So today we had food in honor of Ramadan. Ramadan is a holy month for Muslim individuals. So we had chicken shawarma and injera, tabuye, as well as baklava, which are as well as why am I drawing a blank on the other one that we had? Falafel, excuse me. We had that. We have another event happening on April 10th, celebrating a different culture, Thailand. We're gonna have the Songkran celebration, which will be a water activities outside. We'll have a large scale water fight, kind of celebrating the Thai New Year. There'll be water, inflatables, things of that nature. So we'll continue to do this. TAMU is very good at exposing you as students to different cultures at a different time. So again, I'd like to thank our host today to kind of helping us walk through conflict navigation, conflict resolution and navigating conflict successfully. So let's thank them all very much for coming in. Our last International Leadership Series will be held on April 25th, if I'm not mistaken, that Wednesday, April 25th. Yes, I believe it's 24th. I believe it's April 24th, Wednesday. And that will be talking about storytelling, Laredo, and kind of the piece that exists between understanding between the border, and it's being hosted by Dr. Moman here at Laredo, and they discussed their new book. So we'll see you all in April. Thank you all very much.